The thunder of hooves echoed across the Montana foothills as Willow Reed urged her mare faster through the gathering storm clouds. It was 1878, and the 22-year-old daughter of Utica's postmaster had precisely 15 minutes to deliver an urgent message before the skies unleashed their fury. Her golden brown hair whipped behind her as she pushed forward, determined to reach the Henderson homestead despite her father's warnings about the weather. "Just a little farther, Penny," she encouraged her chestnut mare, patting the horse's neck as they entered the dense pine forest that bordered the eastern edge of their small Montana settlement. The first fat raindrops began to fall, splattering against Willow's blue cotton dress and darkening the fabric in irregular patterns. She glanced upward at the roiling gray clouds and felt the wind pick up, bending the tall pines that surrounded the narrow trail. Perhaps her father had been right to worry. 3 miles from Utica, the storm hit in earnest. Wind howled through the trees, and Penny snorted nervously as thunder boomed overhead. Willow clutched the leather pouch containing the telegram tighter. The Henderson family needed to know about their son's imminent return from back east. News worth braving this tempest. A deafening crack split the air as lightning struck somewhere nearby. Penny reared, her front hooves pawing at the suddenly electrified air. Willow fought to keep her seat, pulling on the reins. "Easy, girl, easy," she called out, but her voice was lost in another thunderous boom. The mare bolted forward in panic, veering from the trail. Willow pulled desperately at the reins, but the horse was beyond reason. They crashed through underbrush, branches whipping at Willow's face and arms. The world became a blur of green and brown and gray as they careened wildly through the forest. She never saw the lightning-struck pine until it was too late. With a groaning creak that rose above even the thunder, the massive tree began to fall directly in their path. Willow yanked the reins hard to the right, and Penny tried to respond, skidding in the mud. The tree crashed down with tremendous force. Willow felt herself flying through the air, then nothing at all. Awareness returned in fragments. Pain, the smell of wet earth and pine, rain on her face, the weight across her legs so immense she couldn't move. Willow opened her eyes to see the massive trunk of a pine tree pinning her to the forest floor. Penny was nowhere in sight. "Help!" she cried out, her voice thin against the storm's fury. "Somebody help me!" But there was no one to hear her desperate pleas in this remote stretch of forest. The rain continued to fall, soaking her to the skin as she pushed against the tree with all her might. It didn't budge an inch. Her legs were caught beneath the massive trunk, and though she could still feel them, thank God they were firmly pinned. Hours passed. The storm gradually moved eastward, leaving behind a steady drizzle and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Willow's throat was raw from shouting, her arms aching from her futile attempts to free herself. As dusk approached, fear gripped her heart. Night in these woods meant mountain lions, wolves, and the bone-deep cold that settled over the Montana wilderness after sundown. "Please," she whispered, no longer certain if she was praying or simply talking to herself. "Please, someone find me." As if in answer, she heard the soft whinny of a horse that wasn't Penny. Willow's heart leaped. "Hello," she shouted with renewed strength. "I'm here, please help me." The sound of hoofbeats grew closer, accompanied by the crunch of boots on wet leaves. And then he appeared, emerging from between the trees like a figure from a dream, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a duster that dripped rainwater and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. "Hello," the man called out, his deep voice carrying through the damp air. "Someone there?" "Yes." "Over here," Willow cried, waving an arm frantically. "I'm trapped." The stranger turned toward her voice, and as he approached, Willow could make out more of him, his strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, eyes the color of a summer sky, and a face weathered by sun and wind. He couldn't have been more than 30, but there was something in those eyes that spoke of hard years lived. "Good Lord," he muttered as he took in her predicament, immediately dropping to a crouch beside her. "Madam, don't you worry, I'll get you out of this." "Thank you," Willow breathed, relief washing over her. "My horse spooked in the storm, and the trees save your strength," he interrupted gently, already shrugging out of his duster. "Name's Adam Stone, I'm going to help you." "Willow Reed," she replied, watching as he assessed the situation, circling the fallen tree and testing its weight. "I live in Utica. My father's the postmaster." Adam nodded, though she wasn't sure he was really listening. His focus was entirely on the tree pinning her down. He squatted down, examining how her legs were trapped, his expression grave but determined. "Miss Reed, I'm going to try to lift this enough for you to pull yourself free. It's a big pine, but it looks like it's resting on some rocks that are taking part of the weight. You ready?" Willow nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. "Yes." Adam positioned himself at the portion of the trunk closest to her legs. He planted his feet wide, bent his knees, and slid his hands beneath the rough bark. She watched the muscles in his arms and shoulders tense beneath his soaked shirt as he took a deep breath. "On the count of 3, I'm going to lift, and you pull yourself out. 1, 2, 3. With a guttural groan, Adam heaved upward. The massive trunk rose perhaps 6 inches, a feat of strength that seemed nearly impossible, and Willow clawed at the ground, dragging herself backward. Pain shot through her legs as circulation returned, but she kept pulling until she was free of the tree's deadly weight. Adam lowered the trunk with another groan, the veins in his neck standing out from the effort. He immediately turned to her, dropping to his knees in the mud beside her. "Are you hurt? Can you move your legs?" Willow flexed her ankles experimentally, wincing at the pins and needles sensation. "I think they're just bruised. Nothing feels broken." He nodded, clearly relieved. "Good, that's good. But we need to get you to a doctor all the same. My camp's not far, and my horse can carry us both to town." Without waiting for her response, Adam scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. The sudden proximity made Willow intensely aware of his warmth, the solid wall of his chest against her side, and the gentle way he cradled her despite his obvious strength. "My mare," she said suddenly. "Penny. She ran off when the tree fell. If she's smart, she'll have headed back to town," Adam replied, carrying her easily through the woods. "We can ask about her when we get there." As they emerged into a small clearing, Willow saw a simple camp, a canvas lean-to, a small fire nearly extinguished by the rain, and a magnificent black stallion tethered to a nearby tree. Adam carefully set her down beside the remains of the fire, immediately working to revive the flames. "You're not from around here," Willow observed, watching him move with efficient purpose around the camp. "No, madam, just passing through on my way to Helena." The fire caught, and Adam added some larger pieces of wood from a protected pile beneath the lean-to. "Been driving cattle most of my life, but I'm looking to try my hand at something new." As warmth from the rekindled fire began to chase away the chill, Willow studied her rescuer. There was something both dangerous and gentle about him, the calloused hands that could lift a tree trunk yet had carried her with such care, the weathered face that remained handsome despite the hardships it had clearly endured. "Thank you," she said softly. "If you hadn't come along." Adam glanced up, meeting her eyes across the fire. "No need to think about that, Miss Reed. Let's just focus on getting you home safe." He moved to his saddlebags, retrieving a battered tin cup and a canteen. "Drink this, then we should head to town before it gets any darker." Willow accepted the water gratefully, only now realizing how parched she was. As she drank, Adam efficiently broke down his camp, loading his few possessions onto his horse. "Ready to ride?" he asked, offering his hand. Willow nodded, setting aside the empty cup. When she tried to stand, however, her legs buckled beneath her. Adam caught her before she could fall, his arm strong around her waist. "Easy now," he murmured, his face suddenly close to hers. "Your legs need time to recover." "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed by her weakness. "Nothing to be sorry for." With gentle efficiency, Adam lifted her onto his stallion, then swung up behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, creating a protective cage that made Willow feel safer than she had any right to after such an ordeal. They rode in silence for a time, the only sounds the steady plodding of the horses' hooves on the wet earth and the occasional call of a bird. Willow found herself leaning back against Adam's chest, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Stay awake, Miss Reed," Adam said, his breath warm against her ear. "We're almost to town, but I need you to stay with me." "Willow," she murmured. "Please call me Willow," she felt rather than saw his smile. "All right, Willow, tell me about Utica. Is it a good place to live?" "It's small," she replied, focusing on his question to keep herself alert. "But growing. We have a general store, a saloon, the post office where my father works. The railroad's supposed to come through next year, and everyone says that'll change everything." "Usually does," Adam agreed. Not always for the better. Willow turned slightly to look at him. You don't care for progress, Mr. Stone? Adam, he corrected with a small smile. And I've seen what progress brings to places like this, some good, some bad, mostly it brings change whether folks want it or not. There was wisdom in his words, and something else, a weariness that made Willow wonder what changes Adam Stone had witnessed in his life. As they crested a hill, the lights of Utica came into view, glowing warmly in the gathering darkness. Willow felt a rush of relief at the familiar sight, even as a strange reluctance tugged at her heart. Once they reached town, her time with this mysterious cowboy would end. That's it, she said, pointing. My father's house is just past the general store with the blue door. Adam guided his horse down the muddy main street, drawing curious glances from the few townsfolk still out in the evening drizzle. By the time they reached the Reed home, Willow's father was already rushing out the door, his face lined with worry. Willow, James Reed cried, hurrying toward them. My God, we've been beside ourselves. Penny came back without you hours ago. Adam dismounted first, then gently lifted Willow down into her father's waiting arms. She was trapped under a fallen tree about 5 miles out, Adam explained as James helped his daughter toward the house. No serious injuries that I could see, but she should rest those legs. Thank you, sir, James said fervently, extending his hand. James Reed, I'm forever in your debt. Adam Stone. They shook briefly. Anyone would have done the same. Nonsense, you're a hero, Mr. Stone. Please come inside. My wife will want to thank you properly, and you must stay for dinner at the very least. Adam hesitated, glancing toward the road out of town. I should be moving on. In this weather. James looked horrified at the thought. No, sir, I insist you stay the night. We have a spare room, and it's the least we can offer. Willow, still supported by her father's arm, found herself holding her breath as she waited for Adam's answer. To her surprise, his eyes sought hers, a silent question in their blue depths. Please stay, she said softly. At least until morning. Something flickered across Adam's face, surprise perhaps, or something deeper. After a moment, he nodded. Much obliged, then. I'll see to my horse and join you shortly. As her father helped her inside, Willow couldn't help glancing back over her shoulder at the tall cowboy leading his stallion toward the small stable behind their house. In the gathering darkness, with his broad shoulders and that weathered hat, he looked like a figure from one of the dime novels she secretly loved to read. Except Adam Stone was real, and something told Willow that her life had just changed irrevocably. Martha Reed's reaction to her daughter's return was a mixture of tearful relief and motherly scolding. After determining that Willow had suffered no lasting injuries beyond severe bruising and exhaustion, she insisted on a hot bath and dry clothes before allowing her daughter to join them for the dinner hastily prepared in honor of their unexpected guest. By the time Willow emerged from her room in a fresh dress, her damp hair neatly braided, Adam had been welcomed into the Reed household with typical frontier hospitality. She paused in the doorway of their modest dining room, momentarily taken aback by the sight of the rugged cowboy seated at their table, engaged in easy conversation with her father. He'd cleaned up as well, his face freshly shaved except for a well-trimmed mustache, his dark hair still damp from washing. Someone, likely her father, had loaned him a clean shirt that strained slightly across his broad shoulders. The transformation was striking. Without the mud and rainwater, Adam Stone was a remarkably handsome man. He rose immediately when he noticed her, an old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with his frontier appearance. Willow, her mother said, come sit down before your dinner gets cold. Mr. Stone has been telling us about his cattle-driving days. Nothing too exciting, I'm afraid, Adam said with a self-deprecating smile as he waited for Willow to take her seat before resuming his own. Mostly dust, cattle, and more dust. You're being modest, James countered, passing a plate of biscuits. Driving 2,000 head from Texas to Kansas is no small feat. Dinner progressed with pleasant conversation, during which Willow learned that Adam had indeed been a cattle driver for most of his adult life, working his way up from a lowly drover to trail boss over the course of a decade. Now, at 29, he was heading to Helena to meet with a business associate about investing his carefully saved earnings in a freight company. The railroads are changing everything, he explained, echoing their earlier conversation. Long cattle drives will soon be a thing of the past. A man has to adapt or get left behind. That's very forward thinking, Martha observed, clearly impressed. Most men would simply continue doing what they know. Adam shrugged. I've never much cared for standing still, madam. And I've seen enough of this country to know change is the only constant. His eyes met Willow's across the table, and she felt a curious flutter in her chest. There was something in his gaze that suggested deeper currents beneath his calm exterior. After dinner, despite Martha's protests that she needed rest, Willow insisted on helping clear the table while her father invited Adam to enjoy a pipe on the front porch. Through the window, she could see the two men talking, occasional laughter drifting in on the night air. He seems a good sort, her mother commented, following Willow's gaze as they dried the dishes together. Very different from the usual rough types passing through. He saved my life, Mama, Willow said quietly. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't come along. Martha patted her daughter's hand. Then we're doubly blessed to have him under our roof tonight, though I suspect your father will talk his ear off until midnight. You know how he gets when he has a new audience for his stories. Willow smiled, knowing it was true. James Reed had never met a stranger, only friends he hadn't made yet. I think I'll join them, she decided, hanging up the dish towel. I'm not tired yet. Her mother gave her a knowing look but said nothing as Willow made her way to the front door. The night air had cleared, stars emerging from between scattered clouds. Adam and her father were seated in the two rocking chairs, a lantern casting warm light across the porch. Both men stood when she appeared. Feeling better? Adam asked, genuine concern in his voice. Much, Willow assured him, though I suspect I'll be quite sore tomorrow. You should rest, daughter, her father said, though his tone was gentle. It's been an eventful day. I've had enough rest, she replied firmly. And I'd like to properly thank Mr. Stone for his heroics without being half delirious from exhaustion. James chuckled. Fair enough. In that case, I believe I'll help your mother finish up inside. He clapped Adam on the shoulder. Don't let her keep you up too late, Stone. The spare room's ready whenever you are. After her father disappeared inside, Willow took his vacated chair, suddenly aware of being alone with Adam for the first time since their ride to town. Your father's a good man, Adam said after a moment. You're fortunate. I know, she agreed. Both my parents are wonderful. They moved us out here from Illinois when I was 12. Father said he wanted a bigger sky over his head. Adam smiled at that. Montana certainly provides that. He glanced upward at the star-filled expanse above them. Hard to imagine living somewhere you can't see all this every night. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the creak of the rocking chairs and the distant piano music drifting from the saloon down the street. Where is home for you, Adam? Willow finally asked. He considered the question longer than seemed necessary. Nowhere particular, I suppose. Been on the move since I was 17. No family, none living. His tone didn't invite further questions on that topic. What about you? A young woman like you must have suitors lining up in a town this size. Willow laughed softly. Hardly. Utica's not exactly overflowing with eligible bachelors and those who are here. She shrugged. Let's just say I haven't met anyone who makes me want to settle for a life of washing their shirts and cooking their meals. Adam's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that what you think marriage is? Isn't it? At least partly. She turned to face him more directly. I've watched my friends marry. They start out with stars in their eyes and end up exhausted, with 3 children under 5 and husbands who barely notice them except at mealtimes and bedtime. That's a rather unromantic view for a young woman. I'm a practical person, Mr. Stone. Adam, he corrected gently. Adam, she amended with a small smile. And what about you? No wife waiting somewhere for the wandering cowboy to return, he shook his head. A cattle driver's life doesn't lend itself to marriage. Long absences, dangerous work, poor pay. Wouldn't be fair to ask a woman to accept those terms. And now that you're changing professions? Adam studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the lantern light. I suppose that remains to be seen. Something in his tone made Willow's heart beat faster. She looked away, back toward the star-filled sky. Will you leave for Helena tomorrow? That was my plan, he replied. Though your father has been trying his best to convince me that Utica has business opportunities worth considering, Willow couldn't help but smile. That sounds like father. He believes Utica will be the next boom town once the railroad comes through. And what do you think? The question surprised her. Most men didn't much care for a woman's opinion on business matters. I think he might be right. We're positioned well, with good access to timber and several nearby mining operations that need supplies and transportation. Adam nodded thoughtfully. Smart assessment. They fell into conversation about the town, its prospects, and the changes sweeping across the Montana territory. Willow found herself increasingly impressed by Adam's intelligence and foresight. He wasn't just a cowboy with strong arms and a handsome face. He had a keen mind for business and a surprisingly nuanced understanding of the economic forces reshaping the West. The hours slipped by unnoticed until Martha poked her head out to gently remind them of the late hour. Willow was shocked to realize it was well past midnight. She couldn't remember the last time she'd found conversation so engrossing that she lost track of time. As they rose to go inside, Adam suddenly winced, his hand going to his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" Willow asked immediately. "It's nothing," he dismissed. "Just strained something lifting that tree, I expect." Willow frowned. "You should have said something earlier." "We have liniment that might help." Before he could protest further, she disappeared inside, returning moments later with a small brown bottle. You should apply this to the affected area," she amended, feeling heat rise to her cheeks at her near instruction for him to remove his shirt. Adam's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I'll do that, thank you." He took the bottle, his fingers brushing hers in a brief touch that sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Good night, Willow Reed. Thank you for the conversation." "Good night, Adam Stone," she replied softly. "Thank you for saving my life." Sleep did not come easily that night. Willow lay awake, replaying the events of the day, the terror of being trapped, the miraculous appearance of Adam, the strange connection she felt to this man she'd known less than 12 hours. It wasn't just gratitude, though that was certainly part of it. There was something about him that called to her, something that made her wonder what it would be like if he decided to stay in Utica rather than continuing to Helena. Such thoughts were foolish, she told herself sternly. Adam Stone was a wanderer by his own admission. Men like him didn't put down roots in small towns like Utica, regardless of the business opportunities. By this time tomorrow, he would be gone, and she would have nothing but memories and a story to tell for years to come about the day a handsome cowboy rescued her from certain death. Yet despite her rational mind's insistence, her heart whispered other possibilities as she finally drifted off to sleep. Morning brought sunshine that transformed Utica, washing away the gloom of the previous day's storm. Willow woke to the sound of her mother in the kitchen and the rich aroma of coffee brewing. For a moment, she wondered if yesterday had been a dream, but the ache in her legs as she swung them over the edge of the bed confirmed the reality of her ordeal. She dressed quickly in a simple blue skirt and white blouse, braiding her hair with practiced efficiency. Downstairs, she found her mother cooking breakfast and her father reading the week-old newspaper that had arrived on the previous day's stage. Adam was nowhere to be seen. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep the question out of her voice as she glanced around the small front room. "There she is," her father said cheerfully. "How are you feeling, daughter?" "Sore, but otherwise well," Willow replied, still looking toward the closed door of the spare room. "Is Mr. Stone still asleep?" Martha exchanged a look with James before answering. "No, dear, he left at first light." Disappointment struck Willow with surprising force. "Oh, I see. He asked us to thank you for the hospitality," her father added. "Said he needed to make Helena by tomorrow if possible." "Of course," Willow said, forcing a smile. "He mentioned his business appointment." She sat down at the table, accepting the cup of coffee her mother handed her, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. It was ridiculous to feel this way about a man she'd known for one evening. Adam Stone had saved her life, they'd shared some pleasant conversation, and now he'd continued on his journey exactly as expected. "He seems a fine man," her father commented, watching her closely. "I suggested he consider Utica for his freight business instead of Helena. More opportunity for growth here," I told him. Willow nodded absently, not trusting herself to speak. "He said he'd think about it," James continued. "Left his direction in Helena in case I heard of any business opportunities that might interest him." At this, Willow looked up sharply. "He did?" Her father confirmed, returning to his newspaper with a poorly concealed smile, wrote it down right there on the desk. Willow's eyes darted to her father's small writing desk, where indeed a folded piece of paper sat prominently in the center. She resisted the immediate urge to look at it, instead focusing on her breakfast when Martha set it before her. Later, she told herself. She would look at it later when her parents weren't watching her so closely. The day passed slowly. Willow helped her mother with household chores, though Martha insisted she rest frequently because of her injuries. By mid-afternoon, she found herself alone in the house, her father at the post office and her mother visiting a sick neighbor. Only then did Willow allow herself to approach the desk and unfold the paper Adam had left. His handwriting was surprisingly neat for a cowboy, strong, clear letters that reflected the man himself. Adam Stone, C/O Montana Freight and Supply, Helena, MT Territory. Below this, he had added a personal note. Miss Reed, thank you for your kindness and conversation. I regret leaving without saying goodbye, but early starts are a hard habit to break. Perhaps our paths will cross again. A.S. Willow read the words 3 times, searching for hidden meanings that weren't there. It was a polite note, nothing more. Yet she carefully folded it and tucked it into her pocket, unwilling to leave it on the desk where her parents might notice its absence. The next 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Willow resumed her normal routine, helping at the post office, assisting her mother with household tasks, attending Sunday services at the small church, and occasionally helping Mrs. Henderson at the general store when deliveries arrived. But everything felt hollow somehow, as if the colors of the world had dimmed slightly since Adam's departure. She caught herself looking up whenever a rider entered town, searching for a tall figure on a black stallion. It was foolish, she knew. Helena was over 100 miles away and Adam had business there. He had no reason to return to Utica. It was on a Wednesday afternoon, as Willow was sorting mail in the post office, that the door opened, sending the small bell above it into a cheerful jingle. She glanced up, preparing her usual greeting, and froze. Adam Stone stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking exactly as she remembered him. "Hello, Willow," he said softly. She stared at him, unable to form words, her heart suddenly racing in her chest. "I hope I'm not intruding," he continued when she didn't respond. "I was passing through and thought I'd stop to see how you were recovering." Finding her voice at last, Willow managed, "You came back to check on me?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Among other things." He glanced around the empty post office. "Is your father here?" "He's at the bank," she replied, still trying to process Adam's sudden appearance. "He should be back shortly if you needed to speak with him." Adam nodded, taking a step further into the office. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with both of you. I've been thinking about what he said regarding business opportunities in Utica." "Oh," understanding dawned. "This is a business call then?" "Partly," Adam admitted, then more quietly, "but I also wanted to see you again, Willow." The simple admission sent a wave of warmth through her. I'm glad you did." For a moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Then the bell above the door jangled again as James Reed returned from his errand. "Stone," he exclaimed, genuinely delighted. "You came back." Adam turned to shake the older man's hand. "Mr. Reed, good to see you again." "None of that Mr. Reed business, it's James to you." He clapped Adam on the shoulder. "What brings you back to our little town?" "Business in Helena conclude already, in a manner of speaking," Adam replied with a glance toward Willow. "I had some productive meetings, but I've been giving serious thought to your suggestions about Utica's potential." James beamed. "Have you now? Well, that calls for a proper discussion. Why don't you join us for dinner again? Martha will be thrilled to see you and we can talk about what opportunities might suit your interests." "I'd be honored," Adam said, his eyes still finding Willow's. "If it's no imposition." "None whatsoever," James assured him. "Willow, why don't you close up early and show Adam around town a bit? I'm sure there have been changes since his last visit." He winked at his daughter, not even attempting subtlety. "Father," Willow protested, mortified by his transparent matchmaking, but Adam smiled. "I'd welcome the tour if you're willing." How could she refuse? 15 minutes later, having locked up the post office, Willow found herself walking down Utica's main street beside Adam Stone. acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople who remembered the handsome stranger who had brought her home after the storm. "Your father isn't particularly subtle," Adam commented as they strolled past the general store. Willow laughed despite her embarrassment. "No, he never has been. I apologize if he made you uncomfortable." "Not at all. I find it refreshing, actually." Adam's pace was unhurried, his hands clasped behind his back as they walked. "How have you been, Willow? Truly?" "Well enough," she replied. "My legs healed quickly. No lasting damage from my adventure under the fallen tree." "I'm glad to hear it." He hesitated, then added, "I thought about you often in Helena." The simple admission made Willow's heart skip. "Did you?" "More than was probably wise," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "It interfered with my business negotiations, I'm afraid." "Is that why you've returned?" "Failed negotiations." She meant it as a jest, but Adam's expression turned serious. "No, the negotiations went well enough, but I realized something during those meetings." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I realized I was planning a future based solely on practical considerations, without thought to what might actually bring me happiness." Willow's breath caught. "And what would bring you happiness, Adam?" His blue eyes held hers. "I'm not entirely certain yet. But I know it wasn't in that office in Helena, discussing freight routes and profit margins with men who've never spent a night under the stars or driven cattle across a river at flood stage. So you've abandoned your plans to leave the cattle drives behind." Willow couldn't help the disappointment that crept into her voice. "No," he said quickly. "That chapter is still closed, but perhaps the next one doesn't need to be written in a city office either." They resumed walking, passing the saloon where piano music spilled onto the street despite the early hour. "Your father mentioned that a new sawmill is being built outside town," Adam said after a moment. "He thinks Utica will need a reliable freight service to move the lumber to the railroad junction at Fort Benton." Willow nodded. "Yes, Mr. Peterson started construction last month. He's already hired 10 men and expects to employ another dozen once it's operational." "That's the kind of opportunity that interests me," Adam explained. "Something with roots in a community, not just passing through." The implication wasn't lost on Willow. "And you're considering Utica for this new venture?" "I am," he confirmed, "if I could find a reason to stay." His gaze met hers again, and this time the meaning behind his words was unmistakable. Willow felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away. "I think," she said carefully, "that Utica offers many reasons for a clever businessman to consider settling here." Adam's smile deepened. "Does it now?" "Perhaps you could point them out to me during this tour." And so she did, showing him the site where the new hotel would be built, the expanding general store, the school that had opened the previous year. With each stop, Willow found herself imagining a future where Adam Stone was a permanent fixture in Utica and in her life. By the time they returned to the Reed home for dinner, something had shifted between them. Nothing had been explicitly stated, but both felt the change, the possibility that hung in the air between them. Martha welcomed Adam as warmly as James had, insisting he stay in their spare room again rather than the rooms above the saloon where he'd initially planned to lodge. Over a dinner far more elaborate than their usual fare, James and Adam discussed business possibilities, while Willow and her mother exchanged meaningful glances across the table. Later that evening, Willow and Adam found themselves once again on the front porch, rocking chairs side by side beneath a canopy of stars. "Your mother outdid herself with dinner," Adam commented. "I suspect she's as interested as your father in convincing me to stay in Utica." Willow smiled, though he couldn't see it in the darkness. "They like you. That's rather rare, actually. They're usually quite protective." "As they should be," he replied seriously. "You're their only child and precious to them. And what about you, Adam? What am I to you?" The boldness of her question surprised them both. Willow had never been so forward with a man before, but something about Adam made her brave. He was silent for a long moment, the only sound the creak of the rocking chairs. Finally, he spoke. "When I found you trapped beneath that tree, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, despite your predicament. When we spoke that night on this porch, I thought you were the most intelligent and engaging woman I'd ever conversed with. And when I rode away the next morning, I thought I was a fool for leaving." He turned to face her, his expression earnest in the faint light from the window. I don't know what you are to me yet, Willow Reed, but I'd very much like the chance to find out. Willow's heart thundered in her chest. I think I'd like that too. Adam's smile was visible even in the dim light. Then I believe I've found my reason to stay in Utica. The following weeks unfolded like a dream for Willow. Adam secured a small building on the edge of town for his fledgling freight business, purchasing 2 sturdy wagons and 4 draft horses to begin operations. James introduced him to key business owners in Utica and surrounding settlements, helping to establish the connections necessary for success in such a venture. But more importantly to Willow, Adam Stone became a fixture in her life. They spent every available moment together walking along the creek that bordered town, sharing meals with her parents, attending Sunday services side by side, and always talking. She learned about his childhood in Texas, the parents he'd lost to cholera when he was 16, his years working cattle drives, and his dreams for the future. In turn, she shared her own hopes and fears, her love of books, her secret desire to someday see the ocean. The town quickly accepted Adam as one of their own, impressed by his work ethic and honest business practices. When Willow walked through town on his arm, she noticed approving nods from the matrons and envious glances from the single women. Adam Stone was considered quite a catch, and it was increasingly obvious to everyone that his attention was focused solely on Willow Reed. 3 months after his return to Utica, on a crisp autumn evening as they walked by the creek, Adam stopped beneath a golden-leaved cottonwood tree and took Willow's hands in his. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled, squeezing her hands. "Perhaps, especially when all my thoughts seem to center on you," Willow's heart quickened. "What sort of thoughts?" "Thoughts of waking up beside you every morning, of building a life together, of perhaps one day watching our children play along this very creek." He took a deep breath. "Willow Reed, I love you. I think I've loved you since I carried you out of that forest. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Willow's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Adam, I love you too." He gathered her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness. When they finally parted, both breathless, Adam reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold ring with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right woman to wear it again." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in Utica's small church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Martha cried throughout the ceremony, while James beamed with pride as he walked his daughter down the aisle to where Adam waited, looking more handsome than ever in a new black suit. Willow wore a cream-colored gown ordered specially from Helena, her golden brown hair adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning. As she spoke her vows, her voice clear and sure, she marveled at how a terrible accident had led to the greatest blessing of her life. The reception was held at the saloon, cleared of its usual clientele for the occasion and decorated with paper streamers and autumn flowers. There was music and dancing, too much food and countless toasts to the happy couple's future. Even the normally reserved Reverend Wilson was persuaded to take a small glass of champagne to honor the newlyweds. Late in the evening, as fiddle music filled the room and couples swirled around them, Adam pulled Willow close on the dance floor. "Happy, Mrs. Stone," he murmured against her ear. "Deliriously so, Mr. Stone," she replied, tilting her face up for a kiss. "Though I'm ready to begin our private celebration whenever you are." Adam's eyes darkened at her words. "In that case, I believe it's time to bid our guests good night." They slipped away amid cheers and good-natured teasing, making their way to the small house Adam had purchased and renovated in preparation for their marriage. It sat at the edge of town with a view of the mountains, perfectly positioned between the growing community and the wild country beyond. As they crossed the threshold, Adam swept Willow into his arms. "Welcome home, wife," he said softly, carrying her through the front room toward the bedroom beyond. "I like the sound of that," she replied, her arms around his neck, heart full to bursting with love for this man who had literally lifted her from danger and into a life she'd never dared to dream of. Later, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Adam traced patterns on her bare shoulder and spoke of their future, the expansion of his freight business, the children they hoped for, the life they would build together in Utica. Willow listened, occasionally offering her own thoughts, marveling at how perfectly their dreams aligned. As she drifted toward sleep in the safety of her husband's embrace, her last conscious thought was that being trapped beneath that fallen tree had been the luckiest accident of her life. Spring came to Montana in fits and starts, snow giving way to mud, then vibrant green that crept up the mountainsides as if painted by an invisible hand. By May, Utica was transformed, the harsh winter forgotten in the rush of new growth and activity. Adam's freight business had flourished beyond even his optimistic projections. The sawmill was operating at full capacity, and Stone Freight and Delivery had secured contracts to transport lumber not only to Fort Benton, but to growing settlements throughout the territory. He'd expanded to 6 wagons and hired 4 men to help with the increasing workload. Willow had taken over full management of the post office, allowing her father to ease into semi-retirement. James still came in most days, but the responsibility now rested on his daughter's capable shoulders, a role she relished, especially as it kept her connected to Adam's business interests. Their home had expanded as well, with Adam adding 2 additional rooms in anticipation of the family they hoped to create. So far, despite their enthusiastic efforts, Willow had not conceived, but neither was discouraged. They were young, healthy, and had plenty of time. On a particularly beautiful May morning, Willow woke feeling strangely different. Adam had already left for an early freight run to Fort Benton, so she was alone when the first wave of nausea hit her. She barely made it to the wash basin before emptying her stomach. When the sickness passed, Willow sat on the edge of the bed, a smile slowly spreading across her face as realization dawned. After dressing quickly, she hurried to her parents' home, finding her mother in the garden. "Mama," she called, unable to contain her excitement. "I need to speak with you." Martha looked up from her flowers, immediately noticing something different in her daughter's face. "Willow, what is it, dear?" "I think," Willow's voice caught with emotion, "I think I'm going to have a baby." Martha's garden trowel fell forgotten to the ground as she rushed to embrace her daughter, tears of joy already forming. "Oh, my darling girl, are you certain?" "Not entirely," Willow admitted, "but I feel different, and I was sick this morning in a way I've never been before." "Those are promising signs," Martha agreed, holding Willow at arm's length to study her. "Have you told Adam?" "Not yet. He left before dawn for Fort Benton. He won't be back until tomorrow." Martha's smile widened. "Then we have time to prepare a special announcement. Come inside and we'll make plans." The next evening, Willow waited nervously at home, everything prepared for Adam's return. She'd baked his favorite apple pie, set the table with their best dishes, and even put flowers in the small vase he'd brought her from Helena. When she heard his wagon approaching, she smoothed her dress one last time and went to the door to greet him. Adam's face lit up at the sight of her, as it always did, no matter how tired he was from the trail. "There's my beautiful wife," he said, jumping down from the wagon seat and striding toward her. "The sight that keeps me moving when the trail gets long." He gathered her into his arms for a kiss that, even after months of marriage, still made Willow's knees weak. When they parted, she took his hand and led him inside. "You've been busy," he observed, noticing the special touches around their home. "What's the occasion?" "Does a wife need an occasion to welcome her husband home?" she countered with a mysterious smile. "Wash up for dinner, everything's ready." Adam gave her a curious look, but did as instructed, returning a few minutes later with clean hands and face. His hair still damp from washing throughout dinner, Willow could barely contain her secret. She asked about his journey, listened to his tales of the growing settlement at Fort Benton, and shared the latest Utica gossip, all while her heart raced with anticipation. Finally, as they finished the last bites of apple pie, Adam set down his fork and fixed her with a knowing look. "All right, Willow Stone, you've been practically vibrating with excitement all evening. What is it you're not telling me?" Instead of answering directly, Willow reached across the table and took his hand, guiding it to rest against her still flat stomach. "We're going to need that extra bedroom sooner than we thought." For a moment, Adam stared at their joined hands, not comprehending. Then understanding dawned, his blue eyes widening. "Willow," he whispered, hope and disbelief mingling in his voice, "are you saying?" She nodded, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. I believe so, in about 7 months if my calculations are correct. Adam was on his feet in an instant, circling the table to pull her into his arms. A baby, he said in wonder, our baby. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the small dining room as she laughed and protested. Adam, put me down before you make me dizzy, he complied immediately, suddenly solicitous. I'm sorry, should you be resting? Do you need anything? Are you feeling well? Willow laughed again at his sudden transformation. I'm perfectly fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time without being treated like porcelain dolls. But Adam's concern was not so easily dismissed. Over the coming weeks, he fretted over every aspect of her condition, insisted on hiring a girl to help with household chores, and reorganized his freight schedules to ensure he was never away from Utica for more than a day. Willow tolerated his protective behavior with good humor, recognizing it as an expression of his love. And truthfully, as her body began to change and the reality of impending motherhood set in, she found his attentiveness comforting. By October, there was no hiding her condition. Her slender frame now supported a prominent belly that seemed to announce her impending motherhood to the world. The women of Utica surrounded her with advice and support, while the men congratulated Adam with knowing smiles and hearty backslaps. It was on a crisp autumn day, nearly identical to the one on which Adam had proposed, that the accident happened. Willow was alone at the post office, sorting the mail that had arrived on the morning stage when she reached for a heavy package on a high shelf. As she stretched, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to gasp and clutch at her swollen belly. The pain subsided quickly, but was followed by another, stronger cramp 10 minutes later. When the third pain hit, accompanied by a rush of wetness down her legs, Willow knew something was terribly wrong. The baby wasn't due for another 6 weeks. She managed to stagger to the door, calling to a passing boy to fetch her mother and the doctor. By the time Martha arrived, Willow was curled on the post office floor, tears streaming down her face as contractions ripped through her body at alarmingly short intervals. It's too early, Mama, she gasped between pains. The baby's not ready. Hush now, Martha soothed, stroking her daughter's hair. Babies come when they decide to, not when we think they should. Dr. Miller is on his way, and your father's gone to find Adam. Everything after that became a blur of pain and fear. Somehow she was transported home and laid in her bed. Dr. Miller arrived, his normally jovial face grave as he examined her. She heard fragments of hushed conversation breach position and complications, and bleeding too heavily. Through it all, Willow kept asking for Adam, needing him beside her, terrified that their child would arrive before he could return from his delivery route to the north. Please, she begged the doctor during a brief respite between contractions. Wait for my husband, doctor. Miller patted her hand sympathetically. Birth waits for no man, Mrs. Stone. This baby is coming now, whether we're ready or not. Another contraction seized her, more powerful than any before, forcing a scream from her throat. As it peaked, the door burst open and Adam stood there, wild-eyed and breathless, having ridden at breakneck speed from 15 miles away. Willow, he cried, rushing to her side, oblivious to the doctor's protestations about cleanliness and proper procedure. Adam, she sobbed, clutching at his hand. I'm so scared. I'm here now, he assured her, his own fear evident despite his attempt at calm. Everything will be all right, doctor. Miller gave up trying to remove Adam from the room and instead put him to work, directing him to support Willow's back as she entered the final, most difficult stage of labor. The next hour was the most harrowing of their lives. Willow fought with every ounce of strength she possessed, Adam's encouragement in her ear giving her courage when her body screamed for surrender. And finally, as the sun began to set outside their bedroom window, a thin, reedy cry filled the room. A boy, doctor. Miller announced, holding up the tiny, red-faced infant. Small, but he's got a good set of lungs on him. Willow collapsed back against Adam, exhausted beyond measure but desperate to see her son. The doctor quickly wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him on her chest. Despite his early arrival, he was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair like his father's, and eyes that, when they briefly fluttered open, showed hints of Willow's hazel. Hello, little one, she whispered, tracing his miniature features with a trembling finger. "We've been waiting for you." Adam leaned down, his face wet with tears as he gazed at his son. "He's beautiful," he said in awe. "Perfect, like his mother." Dr. Miller cleared his throat. "He's early and small, Mrs. Stone. You'll need to keep him warm and feed him often. But he seems strong, and with proper care, I believe he'll thrive." And thrive he did. They named him James Adam Stone, after both his grandfathers, though they quickly took to calling him Jamie. Despite his early arrival and small size, he proved to be a fighter, gaining weight steadily and reaching all the expected milestones only slightly behind schedule. By his first birthday, Jamie was a sturdy, curious toddler with Adam's blue eyes and Willow's smile, the center of his parents' universe and the darling of Utica. The celebration held in the Stones' expanded home, now featuring a large front porch, where the growing family spent summer evenings, was attended by what seemed like the entire town. As Adam and Willow watched their son toddle from guest to guest, accepting treats and attention with sunny equanimity, they held hands tightly, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Did you ever imagine this when you found me trapped under that tree?" Willow asked softly. Adam's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Not specifically this, no, but I knew even then that you were special, that my life would never be the same after I carried you out of those woods." "I'm glad you came along when you did," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "So am I, my love," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "So am I." The years that followed were kind to the Stone family. Adam's freight business expanded beyond Utica to serve communities throughout central Montana, becoming an essential link in the region's growing commercial network. Willow continued to manage the post office until the birth of their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha, in 1882. After that, she focused on their home and children, though she remained involved in the business as Adam's trusted advisor. Jamie grew into a thoughtful, responsible boy who adored his little sister and showed an early aptitude for his father's business. Elizabeth Lizzie, as she was affectionately known, was a spirited child with Willow's golden brown hair and her father's fearless nature, equally comfortable climbing trees with her brother or helping her mother bake bread in the kitchen. In 1886, their family was completed with the arrival of another son, Thomas Reed Stone, a surprise blessing when Willow had begun to think her childbearing years were behind her. Unlike his siblings' dramatic entries into the world, Tommy arrived precisely on his due date after an unremarkable labor, as if determined to carve his own path from the very beginning. As Utica grew, so did the Stone home and property. Adam purchased adjacent land, eventually owning 5 acres at the edge of town where he built stables for his draft horses and warehouses for his freight business. The original house was expanded again and again until it became one of the finest in the area, with a wide wraparound porch, 4 bedrooms upstairs, and modern conveniences that Willow had never imagined when she first arrived in Montana as a child. Through it all, their love remained the solid foundation upon which everything else was built. They weathered the challenges that life inevitably brought: harsh winters that threatened the freight business, childhood illnesses that kept them awake for nights on end, the passing of Martha Reed in 1890 that left a hole in their family circle. But they faced each trial together, their partnership only strengthening with time. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1898, Adam surprised Willow with a journey she had long dreamed of: a trip to San Francisco to see the Pacific Ocean. They left their now thriving business in the capable hands of 19-year-old Jamie and trusted employees, boarding the train that had finally reached Utica several years earlier. The journey west was a second honeymoon of sorts, with long days spent watching the changing landscape through the train window and nights in private compartments where they rediscovered each other away from the responsibilities of home and family. When they finally stood on the cliffs above the Pacific, the endless blue expanse stretching before them, Willow wept at the beauty of it. "It's even more magnificent than I imagined," she said, the wind tugging at her skirts and hair. Adam stood behind her, arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Worth waiting for," Yes, she replied, turning in his arms to face him, like all the best things in life. His smile deepened the laugh lines around his eyes, new features that had appeared over their years together, along with the threads of silver in his dark hair. To Willow, he was more handsome at 49 than he had been at 29, each new line in gray hair a testament to their shared life. "Any regrets?" he asked, suddenly serious. "About the path your life took that day in the forest?" Willow reached up to touch his face, tracing the beloved features she knew better than her own. "Not one," she said firmly. "Finding yourself trapped beneath a fallen tree isn't most women's idea of good fortune, but it was the luckiest day of my life." Adam laughed, the sound carrying on the ocean breeze. "Mine too, Mrs. Stone, mine too." As they turned to walk back to their hotel, arms around each other's waists, both silently acknowledged the truth that had become evident over their 20 years together. Sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive in the most unexpected ways, and what seems like disaster can be the doorway to unimaginable happiness. For Willow and Adam Stone, a chance encounter in a storm-ravaged forest had been just such a doorway, leading them to a love that sustained them through decades, a family that brought them immeasurable joy, and a shared life richer and more fulfilling than either had dared to dream possible. And it had all begun with a fallen tree, a trapped young woman, and a cowboy strong enough to lift not just the tree, but her heart as well.